They say, in that old cemetery, there is a ring. It doesn't stay buried, it waits for someone to pick it up. Hung made the mistake he never should have. And from that night on, the sound of wooden clogs followed him home. The unfinished bride is no longer in her grave. She's looking for someone to take her place. In my village, people have many taboos. You must not call someone's name from behind at midnight. You must not whistle by the riverside when the moon rises. You must not shake out your hair in the yard after sunset. You must not pick up loose coins dropped in front of an abandoned shrine. But among all those prohibitions, there was one sentence that made even the toughest men change their voices when they mentioned it. They did not say it in a crowd. They did not say it while children were still awake. They would usually lean close to each other, lowering their voices so much that it was as if the darkness itself could hear it and carry those words away to wake something sleeping deep under the earth. Never pick up a ring in the cemetery. When I was little, I once heard that sentence from my grandmother on a night when the power was out. She sat fanning herself on a bamboo cot, her face blurred in the oil lamp's glow, while I lay curled in a thin blanket, listening to the insects humming outside in the yard. Back then, I asked why. She did not answer right away. She only stared into the darkness beyond the porch for a very long time. So long that I thought she had forgotten my question. Then she softly said that some things were not treasures, nor objects buried with the dead, but a trap. It lay there not for people to pick it up, but to choose a hand for itself. At that age, I did not understand. I simply thought old people liked making up stories to frighten children. When I grew up, I left the village, learned photography, lived in the town, then moved to the city. As the years passed, that sentence sank into some blurred corner of memory like dead ash. Until I returned home at the most desperate point of my life. And with my own hand I bent down and picked up the very thing I should have run from the moment I first saw it. My name is Hung. That year, I was 29. At that time, my life held nothing except debts piling on top of each other. A sick mother living alone in the village, and a younger sister still in college. I worked as a photographer for wedding shoots, events, birthday parties, baby celebrations, anything that brought in money. Some months, I had enough clients to pay rent, buy medicine for my mother, and send a little to my sister. Other months, business was dead, and my phone vibrated from morning to night with debt collectors calling. There were nights when I lay staring at the damp, moldy ceiling, listening to the traffic outside, and felt as if some invisible stone were pressing down on my chest. So heavy I could barely breathe. Poverty does not kill you immediately. It just gnaws at you little by little, until one day you begin to think of ways to make money that you normally would never dare think about. And it was exactly at that time that I ran into Loy again. Loy was an old classmate from high school. Even back then, he had a reputation for being reckless. Reckless enough that if someone dared him to sleep alone in the district hospital's morgue, he probably would have done it. Later, people said he did all kinds of shady work, land brokering, trading old things, digging scrap metal, buying antique furniture, leading people to search for buried objects lost in abandoned houses. He was the kind of man who could smile calmly while telling the most horrifying story, leaving the listener unsure whether to believe him or simply walk away. That afternoon I met him at a tea stall near the market. A fine drizzle was falling. The market had dispersed, and the ground was muddy. Loy wore a black jacket, sat with one leg crossed over the other, smoking while staring at me as if he could read the entire miserable state written across my face. He did not bother with greetings. The moment I sat down, he asked, "You're in serious need of money, aren't you?" I gave a bitter smile. "Is it that obvious? Debt's choking you already, right?" I did not deny it. Loy lit his lighter, took a drag, then tilted his head and said very quietly, "I know a place where you can get a nice haul." That sentence irritated me instantly. In this world, there is no easy money for desperate people. I asked what kind of job it was. Loy glanced around as if afraid someone might overhear, then leaned in close. "The old graveyard at the edge of Dong Ha Field. You know it, right?" The moment I heard that, my hand froze around my teacup. The old graveyard was no ordinary cemetery. It was a very old burial ground lying apart from the village. Beyond the rice fields, beside a stretch of acacia woods. Ever since the commune built a new cemetery, no one had buried anyone there anymore. The old graves had been abandoned, their headstones cracked, wild grass growing over them. Many brick foundations caved in, and rumor had it that floodwater once washed bones up to the surface. People avoided passing by even during the day, and children in the village were forbidden to go near it. That place had carried a bad reputation for a very long time. People said that deep at night you could still hear wooden clogs clicking from inside. And sometimes they saw a woman in white walking among the graves. Her hair hanging down to her waist, but her feet never touching the ground. I looked at Loy. "So what?" He pulled an old photograph from his pocket, its edges worn and yellowed. In the picture was a young woman in an old-fashioned white dye. Her hair neatly tied up, her skin unnaturally pale. Her face was beautiful, but it was a dead still beauty, like a flower soaked too long in cold water. On the ring finger of her right hand was a ring with a black teardrop-shaped stone. Loy lowered his voice. "The youngest daughter of the landowner family Dao, named Wei, she died before her wedding day. That ring was buried with her. From time to time over the past decades, people still say they've seen it appear in the cemetery." I sneered. "If it's real gold, it wouldn't still be waiting for us. The problem is that no one's ever managed to keep it for more than 3 days." That sentence made me frown. Loy said that since his grandparents' time, there had been rumors that the ring never stayed in the grave. It would appear on the ground during moonless nights, right in front of Wei's tomb. Whoever saw it and picked it up would at first think they'd stumbled onto a fortune. But then they would either go mad, disappear, or be found dead very near the cemetery with the ring finger of their right hand black and bruised as though something had squeezed it until it broke. Some even swore that before dying. They all said the same thing: "The bride is waiting." I should have gotten up and walked away right then. But poverty truly is the thing that makes people slide forward little by little. I looked at the photograph, then at Loy's face. He did not look like he was joking. He reached in and took out another folded slip of paper, inside of which was a photograph of a ring lying on damp grassy ground. The picture was blurry, but the black stone stood out very clearly, glossy like a human eye. "An old drunk took this last year," Loy said. The next morning he burned with fever and babbled in delirium for 3 days. When he came to, he refused to go back. But that thing is real. So you go by yourself. Loy shook his head. I don't want to go alone. 2 men are better than 1. I take my share. You take yours. If we sell it, maybe you can save your neck from those debts. I stayed silent for a long time. In my mind rose my mother's haggard face when she coughed at night. The tuition message from my sister. The debt calls. The threats. For one moment, those things seemed even more terrifying than ghosts. Finally, I heard myself ask, "When do we go?" Loy smiled, but there was no joy in that smile. Tonight. From that very afternoon, a terrible feeling began rising inside me. Like the sense that I was about to step through a door that would never close again. My mother called just as dusk was falling. She asked only ordinary questions. But before hanging up, she suddenly fell silent and asked, "Are you going anywhere tonight?" I was startled. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. I've felt uneasy all day. If you don't have to, don't go out late." I laughed and lied to reassure her. But after the call ended, my palms were icy. At 9 that night, I met Loy at the entrance to the village road. There was no moon. The clouds hung low and thick, covering the sky. The air was damp and cold, as though it had just been squeezed out of the earth itself. Loy carried a flashlight, a short shovel, a small knife, and a backpack. I brought only a flashlight, my phone, and a lighter. We rode our motorbikes around the dirt path behind the fields, left them at the edge of the acacia grove, and walked the rest of the way into the cemetery. The moment we stepped through the collapsed brick gate, I felt an unnatural cold cling to my skin. It was not like the wind over the fields at night. It was the cold of a house floor that had not seen sunlight for years. The cold of tombstones wet with dew. The kind of cold that seeped into your nails and joints. The smell of rotting soil, burnt incense, and sharp grass blended into something that made my throat tighten. My flashlight beams swept across graves of different heights. Some leaning, some cracked, some nothing more than half a headstone planted crookedly over a mound of earth. The deeper we went, the thicker the air became. The sound of insects gradually disappeared. Only our footsteps through wet grass remained. And our breathing, half swallowed by the darkness. Several times, I thought I heard someone walking behind us. Every time I turned around, the flashlight only shone on mossy gravestones and clumps of grass trembling faintly. Loy stopped in front of a large white stone tomb, carved with lotus flowers on both sides. Chipped at the edges, the inscription had faded, but a few final words could still be made out. "Beloved daughter." Wei. Both of us stood frozen. Right in front of the tomb, on the dark damp soil, lay a ring. I do not know how to describe what it felt like to see it. It did not reflect light like ordinary metal. It revealed itself in the darkness with a quiet, deep, cold gleam, as though someone had set down a black eye there and was waiting for us to bend down and look. There was not a trace of mud or dirt on it. In a place of rotting grass, standing water, and decaying leaves, it was unnaturally clean. I heard Loy swallow. He moved the flashlight closer, then reached out, but before his fingers touched it, he snatched his hand back as if stung by freezing cold. "You pick it up," he said, his voice warped. My hand suddenly went numb. I cursed under my breath. But somehow my eyes stayed glued to that black stone. The longer I stared, the more beautiful it seemed in a sickening way. It looked like a drop of night that had frozen solid. Like the bottom of a deep well when you can't see how far down it goes. The longer I looked, the more I felt as though something inside it was moving ever so slightly. Like the pupil of an eye just opening below the surface. Then I heard a whisper. Very close. Right by my left ear. "Pick it up." I flinched and spun around. Behind me were only rows of gray graves. No wind. The air stood still like a thick layer of water. I asked Loy if he had heard anything. He shook his head, his face pale as paper. We should have run right then. But in that exact moment, my debts, my desperation, and the corrupt curiosity in human nature pushed me forward. I bent down and picked up the ring. The cold from it pierced straight into my hand like needles made of ice. The flashlight went out for exactly 1 heartbeat. Darkness fell like thick mud. And in that darkness, I clearly heard someone laugh right beside my throat. It was not a loud laugh, but a soft vibration in the throat of a woman leaning so close that the cold of her breath brushed past my ear. With it came the scent of old jasmine, the kind of sweetness that rises from an old altar, mixed with the dank smell of wet earth. The flashlight came back on. I was standing before the tomb, the ring in my hand, and the moment my fingers clenched around it, from deep inside the cemetery came the sound of wooden clogs striking stone. Cock. Then again. Cock. Neither fast nor slow. Steady. As if someone were walking toward us very calmly, certain that the prey would not be able to escape in time. Loy reacted first. He shouted, "Run," and turned to flee. I stuffed the ring into my pocket and sprinted after him. The path back to the gate had seemed short, yet suddenly it felt unbearably long. My flashlight shook wildly, sometimes catching graves, sometimes sweeping over grass, sometimes blindingly flashing across white stone surfaces like dead faces. The clogs remained behind us. Not any faster, yet not falling farther away. I tripped over a brick and nearly fell just as I saw Loy ahead suddenly stop and let out a hoarse scream. My flashlight swung to his feet, and I saw a black hand, nothing but skin stretched over bone, thrusting up from the ground and seizing his ankle. Its fingers were far too long for a human hand, the nails black and curved like rotten roots. Loy slammed his shovel wildly into the ground while I rushed over and grabbed him. The hand tightened once more, then let go. It slipped back beneath the grass so quickly it was as if it had never been there. But 5 dark bruises had already appeared around Loy's ankle. We kept running, bursting through the cemetery gate, through the acacia grove, until we reached the bikes before daring to look back. In the darkness by the gate stood a woman in white. The distance was far, yet somehow I could still see with terrifying clarity that she had raised her right hand to chest height. Her ring finger was bare. From the moment I got back to my room, I already knew something was wrong. I remembered very clearly stuffing the ring into my pocket before running. Yet the next morning when I woke up, I found it lying on the bedside table, right next to my cup of water and a pack of cigarettes. Clean, dry, ice cold. The trousers I had thrown on the chair the previous night still had empty pockets. I stood staring at it for a long time, my heart pounding, my mind trying desperately to find some normal explanation, but failing. In the end, I told myself that maybe I had taken it out in my panic and simply forgotten. My phone vibrated. It was Loy. His voice sounded strange, dry and low, as if echoing up from a throat being choked. "Did you see anything?" I told him the ring had somehow appeared on my table. The line went silent for a long time. Then Loy said he had not slept at all. Every time he dozed off, he dreamed of a woman sitting in the corner of his room, hair covering her face, both hands resting on her knees, sitting there from midnight until dawn. He could not see her face, but he could clearly see that the ring finger of her right hand was empty. At some points I could hear wooden clogs circling my bed. Loy whispered, even under the blanket, I could still hear them, round and round, like she was waiting for me to stick my hand out. I shuddered. We agreed to take the ring and sell it that very day. Whether it was real gold or some antique, we had to get it out of our hands. I brought it to the biggest gold shop in town. The owner was a difficult man, but well known for knowing old objects. He held the ring, studied it for a long time with a magnifying glass, then suddenly set it down hard on the glass counter, his face visibly changing. "Where did this come from?" "I bought it." He shook his head immediately. "I won't buy it." "Why?" "Because this is not something for the living." I thought the old man was just superstitious, so I gave a stiff laugh and asked its price. He looked at me as if I were a dying man who did not know he was about to die. "You held it with your right hand, didn't you?" My chest tightened. "Why?" He did not answer. He only pointed at my hand. I looked down. At the base of the ring finger of my right hand, I suddenly saw a faint red indentation that had somehow appeared, like the mark left by a ring worn for a long time. I jerked my hand back. The gold shop owner pushed the ring back toward me, his voice turning cold. "Take it home. Don't leave it here." That very night, I wrapped the ring in several layers of cloth, put it in a wooden box, sealed it with tape, shoved it deep into the wardrobe drawer, and locked it. I drew the curtains, turned on every light in the room, and told myself that if I could just get through a few days, everything would return to normal. But at exactly 1:17 a.m., I was jolted awake by a very faint rattling sound coming from the wardrobe. At first I thought it was a rat. Then the sound changed, drier and more regular. Tap, 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 like fingernails knocking on wood from the inside. I lay rigid on the bed, cold sweat running down my spine. The tapping stopped. In its place came the soft sound of metal dropping onto the floor. Clink. My trembling hand turned on the light. The ring lay in the middle of the floor. The wardrobe door was still locked. The wooden box was still in the bottom drawer. The tape still intact. I opened it. Inside was empty. I did not dare touch the ring again. I sat curled on the bed until dawn, my eyes fixed on it, while it lay motionless on the floor as if staring back at me. The next morning I ran straight back to the village to find Loy. His door was half open. Inside, the house was dark and heavy with the smell of cold medicine. I stepped into his bedroom and found him sitting upright on the bed, his back against the wall, eyes wide open. In a single night, Loy had wasted away. His skin was pale, and there were dark hollows under his eyes. But the most frightening thing was that he was not looking at me. He was staring fixedly at the corner of the room as though someone were sitting there. "Hung," he called my name softly. "Don't turn your back toward the door." I stood still. "What happened to you?" "She came into my house last night." "Who?" Loy swallowed. "The bride." He said that at midnight he heard wooden clogs from the yard. Then the clogs climbing onto the porch. Stopping at the door. The door never opened, but the room suddenly became freezing cold. He hid under the blanket and did not dare poke his head out. The clogs circled the bed. Slow and horrifying. Near dawn, all sound stopped. When the sky began to lighten, he lowered the blanket and saw a woman sitting in the corner of the room. White clothes, hair hanging down, both hands resting on her lap. She sat there until sunrise, then gradually faded like mist. But on the floor where she had sat, a dark wet stain remained, and the scent of old jasmine would not disappear. I followed his gaze. In the corner of the room there truly was a dark stain spreading over the tiles, as if dirty water had just evaporated there. Loy asked if I still had the ring. I took it out. The moment I peeled back the cloth, Loy shrieked as if stabbed and recoiled into the corner of the bed. "Put it away. Don't bring it near me." Before I could react, a woman's laughter suddenly drifted in from the yard. Very faint, very close. Both Loy and I froze. It was not the laughter of someone happy, but the sickening sound of someone delighting in another person's terror. I left Loy's house with a growing, hidden panic inside me. That afternoon, I went to find Aunt Sao Nyan, the woman villagers quietly mentioned whenever something unclean happened in someone's house. Aunt Sao lived at the end of the hamlet in a small house surrounded by mugwort, basil, and soapberry pods drying on the porch. Before I had even sat down, she looked directly at my right hand and her face darkened. "What did you bring back from the dead?" I placed the ring on the table. The moment she saw it, the incense stick on the altar behind her suddenly crackled and spat sparks, its ashes falling in flakes. Aunt Sao immediately threw a red cloth over the ring, then made me tell the whole story from beginning to end. When I finished, she sat silent for a very long time. Finally she said that long ago, the youngest daughter of the Dao family, named Wei, had been engaged to the son of a wealthy district official. The wedding was about to take place when the fiancé died suddenly. Rumor said he had betrayed her, that he had planned to break the engagement and marry someone else. Wei went mad and hanged herself in the wedding room while still wearing a white ao dai and holding the ring that had not yet been exchanged. The Dao family, afraid of ill fortune, buried her that very night, without ceremony, but still buried the ring and her wedding clothes with her. After that, the family was plagued by disaster. A servant jumped into a well. The nanny babbled like a mad woman before dying in a dark room. And Wei's parents fell ill and died one after the other. Since then, villagers had passed down the story that the unmarried bride never accepted her rest. She wanted to find another hand to wear the ring, wanted to drag a living person down to take her place so that she could step out of the grave. Aunt Sao took my right hand. I went cold when I saw that the red indentation at the base of my ring finger had grown darker, as clear as the mark of an invisible ring. "It has marked you," she said softly. "Is there any way to cut it off?" Take it back before midnight tonight. Place it exactly in front of her old grave. But remember this well. No matter what you hear, do not answer. No matter what you see, do not stare too long, and above all, do not turn around. I asked about Loy. Aunt Sal slowly shook her head. If she has already sat in that boy's room from morning until evening, then half his soul may already have been led away. The words made my heart sink like something dropped into a bottomless pit. That evening I ran to Loy's house once more, intending either to drag him with me or at least tell his family. But the house was empty. Bedding was strewn across the floor. A plastic chair lay overturned in the corner. On the wall facing the bed were 5 long gouges, deep enough to strip the plaster away. On the tiled floor were wet, muddy footprints trailing to the back door. I followed them into the yard, through the fence, and then they vanished at the edge of the field. The muddy prints led straight toward the cemetery. That night, darkness fell faster than usual. The clouds hung low, the air heavy with the smell of rain. Though no rain came, Aunt Sal gave me a small cloth pouch filled with incense ash, coarse salt, and a charm folded into 8 parts. She said that if something blocked my path, I should throw it onto the ground and run straight. I held the ring wrapped in red cloth, feeling its icy cold seep through the layers like a living lump of ice. The path into the cemetery on the second night was even more terrifying than the first. There were no frogs, no crickets, not even the sound of leaves rustling. The entire field felt as though it had been gagged. As soon as I stepped through the cracked gate, I saw a figure standing inside. It was Loy. He stood with his back to me between 2 rows of graves. His head lowered, his arms hanging limp at his sides. I called his name on reflex. He slowly turned around. If anyone asked me what image haunted me most in my life, I would say it was that face. Loy's eyes were opened far too wide, but there was more white than black in them. His lips were pale, split at the corners as if he had bitten them himself. His face looked wrinkled and sagging, like the face of someone who had soaked in water for days. He looked at me and smiled. That smile was crooked, twisted, and empty. It was not the smile of an old school friend, but the smile of a corpse that had just learned how to jerk its facial muscles. "Hung," he said, his voice a mixture of wind and water seeping through a grave. "She's been waiting for you." I stepped back. "Loy, wake up." He tilted his head. "I'm very awake. You're the one who still doesn't understand. Someone has to stay, so someone else can leave." At that moment, the sound of clogs came again from deep within the cemetery. Cock, cock, cock. Loy stepped aside like a servant making way for his master. From between the leaning graves emerged the woman in white. This time I could see her more clearly than on the first night. Her clothes were not pure white, but the color of old porridge cloth, wet and clinging around the hem as if dragged through mud for a long time. Her long black hair hung loose, some strands plastered to her neck. Her face was beautiful in a terrifying way, pale blue-white like soaked flesh. Her lips dark red but cracked. Her eyes so black and deep that they reflected no light. And around her neck was a narrow purple bruise running all the way around like a rope mark. Whenever she took a step, her body did not rise and fall like a normal person's. It glided very slightly, while only the clogs struck steadily against the damp ground. She stopped a few steps away from me. The scent of old jasmine rose so strongly that it made me sick. "Have you brought the ring to me?" she asked. Her voice was soft, light, gentle enough that if we had not been standing in a cemetery, one might have thought it belonged to a refined young woman speaking sweetly. But that very softness was what made every hair on my body stand up. It sounded like a voice rising from the bottom of a well, both distant and right next to my ear. My hand shook as I held out the red-wrapped bundle. "I brought it back. I'm not taking it anymore." She smiled. "But you already held it with your right hand." "I'm sorry." Many others were sorry too. "If I return it, then spare me. Spare my friend too." She turned to look at Loy. He stood motionless, eyes dull, like a puppet being pulled by strings from behind. She softly said, "Your friend has already promised to stay." Ice shot down my spine. He promised nothing. Those who fear death promise very quickly. I threw the bundle down in front of the tomb. The ring rolled out of the cloth and landed exactly where I had picked it up the night before. For one instant, the whole cemetery fell silent. I thought maybe that was the end. But she looked at the ring, then lifted her eyes to me. The smile on her lips slowly faded, and her eyes seemed even blacker. "Too late," she whispered. The ground beneath my feet trembled. Not violently, only faintly, but enough to make all the grass around us shiver at once. Then from the dark patches of soil between the graves, hands began to emerge. Some were only bones. Some were covered in shriveled skin. Some had long black nails like rotten roots. They pushed up through the earth, wriggling, clawing at the air like a swarm buried underground that had suddenly smelled the living. I turned to run, but Loy lunged at me. He slammed me down into the wet grass with monstrous strength, far greater than any normal man's. His face dropped close to mine. His breath rank and cold. He screamed in a voice mixed with sobbing. "Stay. If someone takes my place, I can leave. I don't want to stay here alone." I struggled and twisted, looking past his shoulder. The woman in white still stood there, her lips curving slightly as though enjoying the sight. Behind her, more and more hands rose from the ground, bringing with them the stench of muddy rot and decaying flesh. I thrust my hand into my pocket, pulled out Aunt Sal's pouch, and hurled it onto the ground. Incense ash and coarse salt scattered everywhere. A shrill scream ripped through the air. Loy released me instantly as though burned, rolling away and clutching his head. The hands in the earth convulsed, then retreated. The bride's face distorted for 1 second. The pale skin around her neck split open, revealing a deep black hollow like a strangulation wound that had never healed. I sprang up and ran. Her scream tore through the darkness behind me, no longer gentle, but sharp, long, pained, and full of hatred, like silk being ripped inside a coffin. I did not turn around. I ran through the rows of graves, past broken stones and grass up to my knees. At times I felt icy fingers brush my ankles. At times I clearly heard my mother calling from behind me. Then my sister crying. Then Loy groaning and begging for help. I clenched my teeth and did not answer. I only ran until I burst out through the cemetery gate, across the field, and collapsed in Aunt Sal's yard. I burned with fever for 3 days. In my fever, I dreamed of a wedding chamber covered in cobwebs, with a carved wooden bed in the middle and an old wedding dress turned yellow with age laid across it. I saw the bride sitting before a mirror, combing her long hair, her head tilted to one side as though her neck could not support it. She lifted the ring, but in the mirror, the hand holding it was not hers. It was mine. At other times I dreamed I was standing in the cemetery while the graves opened slightly like mouths. And from inside came the whispering voices of dozens of women together. Put it on. Put it on. Put it on. When I woke, I saw Aunt Sal sitting beside the bed, her face worn and hollow. She told me Loy was dead. Early that morning, they found him lying beside the field near the path to the cemetery. The 5 bruises on his ankle from the first night were still there. Around his neck was a thin purple line. But the worst thing was that the ring finger of his right hand had been broken and bent sideways, as though some tremendous force had twisted it out of shape. I asked where the ring was. Aunt Sal did not answer immediately. After a while she unfolded the red cloth on the little table beside her. The ring lay there, icy cold, its black stone still as a bottomless pit. It had returned again. She told me she had tried everything. She struck it with a hammer and the hammer handle broke. She threw it into the well. And the next morning it lay on the altar. She buried it under a banana tree. And by noon it was sitting on the doorstep. She carried it toward the shrine at the entrance of the village. But before she could set it down, the wrapping slipped away by itself and the ring rolled right back to her feet. This is no longer just a burial object, she said. It is a call, a hook. I asked what I was supposed to do. She shook her head, and for the first time I saw helplessness in her eyes. She told me to avoid wedding rings, avoid weddings, avoid cemeteries, avoid being alone too long on moonless nights. If one day I ever saw the ring appear in front of me again, I must never touch it a second time. I listened, knowing deep down that both she and I understood the truth. There are things that, once they cling to you, can never truly be cut away. You can only go on living while trying not to let them grow stronger. I left the village, moved permanently to the city, changed my phone number, changed my room, buried myself in work. I never told this story to anyone again. During the first months, I slept every night with the lights on, every mirror in my room covered, my right hand often numb and freezing as though someone were sliding an invisible ring onto it. But time passed, and the terror faded a little. I began to believe that perhaps I had escaped. Perhaps because I had returned the ring. Perhaps because Loy had stayed in my place. Perhaps because the bride had finally tired of hunting. I was wrong. 3 years later, I took a wedding photography job for a wealthy family in the suburbs. The bride, Lynn, was young, beautiful, gentle. Everything went normally until I photographed the ring exchange. I remembered very clearly that the rings they used were plain white gold bands. But when I looked at the image on my camera screen, in one close-up frame, the bride's hand was wearing a ring with a black teardrop-shaped stone. My heart stopped for a second. I looked up at her real hand. There was nothing there. I told myself it was reflection, illusion, my mind haunted by old memories. But that night, while editing the photos, I found something else. In the last 3 frames, reflected in the glass behind the bride, stood a woman in white. She had her right hand resting on the bride's shoulder. Her ring finger was bare. I cancelled the photo set, claiming the memory card was corrupted. A week later I returned to reshoot and was told the wedding had been cancelled. The groom had died in a traffic accident on his way home after the ceremony rehearsal. The bride had gone mad, screaming over and over that a woman was standing in the mirror asking to borrow her ring. That night, when I returned to my apartment, the door was half open even though I had locked it that morning. I stepped inside. Everything was untouched, but on my desk, between my hard drives and contract papers, sat a small wooden box. I recognized it instantly. It was the same kind of box I had once used to lock the ring away years before. My hands shook uncontrollably as I opened the lid. Inside, lined with red cloth, lay the ring, calm and still as if it had never once left my life. Beside it was a long black strand of hair curled into a circle exactly the size of a finger. Behind me, inside the locked room where I was alone, came the sound of wooden clogs. Cock. Then another. Cock. Not hurried, not frantic, just slow enough for me to understand that it had come back and that nothing could stop it anymore. A hand as cold as something drawn from the bottom of a deep well touched my right shoulder very lightly. I did not turn around. I did not dare. From that night until now, I have lived like a man who always hears footsteps behind him. I change houses constantly. I no longer photograph weddings. I avoid funerals, cemeteries, jewelry shops. I have never allowed anyone to place any ring on the ring finger of my right hand. I sleep with the lights on, mirrors covered, and I never stay alone on moonless nights if I can help it. But some things still find ways to slip in. There are nights when I wake with a start and find the mattress beside me sunk down as though someone had been lying there for a long time. Some mornings I wake to a long black hair on my pillow even though I live alone. Once, while washing my hands, I looked up at the mirror and saw a woman standing behind me. Her head tilted to one side, lips dark red, a rope mark around her neck. I spun around, and there was nothing there. But in the sink, a thick black drop of water suddenly fell, rank as grave mud. The worst is on drizzling nights or moonless nights. The sound of wooden clogs returns in the hallway outside my apartment door. It approaches very slowly, stops right in front of the door, does not knock, does not call. It only stands there for a very long time, as if it knows that one night I will no longer be able to bear it and will open the door to look. A few months ago, I fell asleep near dawn. When I woke, the ring finger of my right hand once again bore a red indentation, deeper than ever before. On the bedsheet beside me was a black handprint made of dirt, and the little wooden box sat right at the head of the bed. I did not open it. I no longer needed to. I already knew what was inside. Perhaps she never truly needed the ring. Perhaps what she had wanted from the very beginning was only a person desperate enough, lonely enough, weak enough to bend down and pick up the hook waiting in the cemetery. Because once you touch it, that hand no longer fully belongs to the living. I am writing this story down not to boast, nor to ask anyone to believe me. I only want that if one day you pass by an old cemetery, an abandoned burial ground, or a moss-covered graveyard where no one goes anymore, and you suddenly see a ring lying there among the wild grass, unnaturally clean, shining in the darkness with a gleam that does not look like metal, Then walk away immediately. Do not stare at it too long. Do not wonder whether it is real gold or an antique. Do not think you are only picking it up to take a look. Do not think that if you are poor enough, desperate enough, gambling once might be worth it. Because there are things that, once they lie in a cemetery, are no longer objects. They are an open mouth, an invitation, a trap laid there waiting for exactly your hand. And once you pick it up, perhaps you will no longer be the one holding the ring, but the one being held by it. So remember this well. Do not forget it. Do not ever forget it. No matter how desperate your life becomes. Never pick up a ring in the cemetery. Because the moment your fingers touch it, somewhere very deep under the ground, an unmarried bride may open her eyes. And from that moment on, she will no longer wait inside her grave. She will begin following you home.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.